Going on, everybody? That never happened before. That's funny. Well, what's going on, y'all? We're getting closer and closer to the end of the season. I hope everybody's Thanksgiving was good. Ate a lot, probably ate too much, but that's okay. You gotta have your days where you do that because if you don't, I'm telling you, you're gonna lose your mind. Weight loss journey is a lifelong thing. Well, not lifelong thing once you lost the weight, but like once you keep it off, and it's just a lifelong thing. But you got to remember to have your days where you just kind of go crazy. Thanksgiving is that time. It's really my favorite holiday, like for real, like no cap. Like people, oh, my favorite holiday is Christmas. Mine is Thanksgiving. I don't, maybe just because I like to eat. I don't know. You can eat that stuff year round. Most of us probably do eat that stuff other times too, but it is what it is. It's the fall is falling in Houston, like for real. It's been pretty cold. It don't feel like Houston right now, but watch it blow up back to 80 probably in a week or two. I'm sick of it. But before we get into that, my mug is back. I haven't used it in the last few weeks, but it's back. Before we get into that, this week's episode is centering around, as always, with decision making and decision fatigue. But what happens when we have bad habits? If you just really anybody, we all have them, but especially this finding yourself age, the 25 to 34, it really is that time where you really are trying to figure out a lot. And it's interesting to see how things will come about with life. And when we have all these bad habits, and maybe you might not have a lot of them, but you got some. There's some you do you don't want to do no more. And some stuff is big, some stuff is small. But this episode is going to hopefully help with that and choosing with being sober minded. Now, when we think of sober minded, we instantly, it's a biblical obviously reference, and we'll get into that. But we instantly think of sober minded, we always think of drunk and we think of alcohol. That's not always the case. But before we get into that, let's get into the week's meme. This week's meme says, your life could get so much better if you literally stop doing what you know you're not supposed to be doing. Inspirations for this week, simple ones. Two of them are quotes. One of them says, don't let your sins turn into bad habits. And this is Saint Teresa of Avila. And then the other one says, one bad habit often spoils a dozen good ones. That's by Napoleon Hill. And just me personally, we're struggling with, habits and the desire to stop certain things before I get old. That's kind of one of the reasons I did decide to lose weight now, because I don't want to have to get old and be on those blood pressure medicines and all that stuff. So I'm like, let me kick it now before we get to that point. Now, before we get into introducing this week's guest, I told y'all the rest of the season is going to be guest up. So it's going to be, interviews back to normal. Jason Frank died. Did y'all hear about that? People probably like, who is that? That is the OG Power Ranger who was such an OG, they kept bringing him back. That was sad. And then it wasn't like he died, like in a car accident or something, that he couldn't control. They think it was suicide. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And once again, it proves that no amount of money in the world can, because we know he has money, can stop you from being sad and depressed and stuff, especially during these seasons. I think the story is still kind of developing. I heard they was possibly going through a divorce or something. And, that's hard for anybody. But it's interesting to see how so many people rallied around that, which is good. Because sometimes with suicide, as a community, I believe that we are sad. We definitely have empathy for people that do it. But I think some people still kind of be like, it's, filled with suicide. They're like, oh, that's stupid. Why would you do that? And you can't really be like that. It's unfortunate that, people, that's their last resort, or they feel like that's their last resort. But it's unfortunate. Too many people have those feelings. And when you say comments like that, they're going to be hesitant to speak up about it, because it's kind of like, if they feel that way and they openly heard you bash somebody for committing suicide, why would they vent to you about it? Why would they vent to you about it if you just, so now then they're going to feel like you judging them. On the other hand, you could say, well, you shouldn't care what people think about you, but come on, really? That's one of them situations where it's just, it's hard, and I can see both sides of the ball. But moving forward, if you have those kind of weird views, even if you think somebody wouldn't do it, that don't mean, because a lot of people that commit suicide, people you would never think would do it. So just keep that in the back of your mind when you have your little rants or your little just thoughts, because you just never know who you could be triggering with somebody with that. Okay, so usually my rants are kind of funny. That was more a little serious, but we're gonna get into some jokes today, I promise, because we can't be too serious all the time. So let's get into this week's definitions. Well, I'll get into that. Let me introduce my guest first. All right, what's going on? Tell the people what your name is, where you're from, and where you live.
What's up, man? Happy Tuesday. My name is Benoit Kim. I am the host of the Discover More podcast and a full-time clinician and a U.S. Army veteran. And I currently live in Los Angeles, where it's always sunny and there's always traffic.
Always sunny and always traffic. Now, I've only been to LA once. I'm actually supposed to be going back soon. But with LA, is it true that it's always like the weather is literally always perfect, like all the time?
Yeah, it's 78 degrees right now. I took out an hour and a half morning hike this morning for 3 miles. So yeah, it is almost always sunny, because Philadelphia isn't always sunny, but LA is always sunny, if you catch my drift.
I caught the drift. I caught it instantly. It's a show for those that don't know. Y'all probably know the show. So now, when you hear the word quit, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Quit.
Quit.
Limit.
When you hear the word or phrase bad habit, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Unsustainable.
When you hear the word addiction, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Pain.
And when you hear the word sober, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Lucid.
So the definition for quit is leave a place, usually permanently. Bad habit, it says a bad habit is a negative behavior. Common examples include procrastination, overspending, and nail biting. That came from Wikipedia. Addiction, it says the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. And then sober, it says not given to excessive indulgence in drinking any other activity. And I like that, any other activity, because it's not just drunk. So now tell me about your podcast. Tell me, we said it's the Discover podcast, Discover More podcast. You can see it right there. How did you come up with the title? How did it even come about?
Yeah, I think some of the qualities that I really attribute where I am in life at age 30 is gratitude, intentionality, and curiosity. Because I think without curiosity, the world is boring. There's a lot of stagnancy. So I said, why don't I name it that's reflections of my core value and ethos, which is discover more lifestyle, discover more insights, discover more mental health. And with my most recent brand rebranding, we call it discovering more authentic, introspective life stories. Because I feel like stories are content nowadays, and everyone and their mothers are commodifying stories. But as a therapist, I know that stories are more than just content. It's part of who we are, because it's a visceral experience as what we've gone through. So.
Okay, I like to hear it. So what is the typical guest you look for your podcast? What are some of the topics you typically cover for somebody to say, hey, I want to check, sounds interesting? What's the final pull in for the new listeners?
So latest few guests have been world-class psychologists. I had Dr. David Roddan. He's actually the top 1% most cited scholars of all scholars on suicide, which is very pertinent to what we talked about, how you started this episode. So I've been interviewing a lot of psychotherapists and professors and psychologists lately, just because that's the current chapters in life. But I speak with entrepreneurs and a lot of people who are considered as students of life, who uphold this endless curiosity and who want to impart some goods through their work. But I'm very big on mindsets, insights, and just how mental health underlies everything we do.
Okay. All right. Good stuff. So that leads perfectly into the next segment, which is what does this have to do with mental health and how this topic relates to mental health. So first off, you already kind of stated that you are a psychotherapist, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were originally a policymaker, which most people do not know. So how did you go from policymaking to psychotherapist?
How much time do we have? So I think there's a lot of vehicles for change. So as a psychotherapist, as a doctors, lawyers, you can maybe impact hundreds, couple hundred people a year, which is still amazing. But as a policymaker, with the sign of a bill, some collaborations, you can impact hundreds and thousands. And I'm from Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. So obviously, Philadelphia has one of the highest illiteracy rates, one of the highest poverty rates, one of the highest crime on people of color, especially Black and brown folks, like Chicago. So I was very dedicated in the education aspect, especially the truancy side. So I went to graduate school at University of Pennsylvania, the #1 program in the country for education policy. And I wanted to become this vanguard that really helps marginalized Black and brown folks, and especially other people of color folks who don't have as much opportunities because of the systems, because of the intricacies of their backgrounds, to really create some change on a policy front. But I got really jaded through my work for the 6 years. And I realized that a lot of these societal issues I was really passionate about were actually byproducts or reflections of mental health issues, intergenerational trauma, poverty, unintended mental health issues like that. So I decided to go from the macro to the micro, which is clinical work.
Okay. All right. So still wanting to bring about change just from a different angle. So with being, because obviously your podcast, you got a lot going on. So you're a creative and all that, that I can call you that, correct?
Yes.
Do you feel that maybe it got a little boring?
From policy backgrounds?
Yes.
No, because I think it requires a certain level of competency to really appreciate the depth of anything that you do. So Izzy, I'm sure you could relate. I'm sure it would take you a year or 2 years to actually appreciate the water and the art of podcasting. So I feel like I was just getting to the cusp of holy moly. I don't know if you're allowed to cuss on your show. That there's so much water into policymaking. So I felt I was on the cusp of evolution until I got jaded and I saw some really, really dark side in addition to the politics that people talk about. So I realized I didn't want to give up my soul for the sake of impact. So I took that pivot early on because I read Obama's Promised Land, and he talks about he wasn't able to incite as much change with the '08 housing bubble crash. So if a person like him has to take his limitations and compromise, who am I to say I'm different? I will never be unimpacted by this political motions, which is unrealistic. So I took my L's, and I think I'm choosing my battles.
Okay, good. Okay, that's a nice segue to the next thing. So the article that I got, one of them, it says, what does it mean to be sober-minded? And so from this article, it says, more broadly, being sober-minded means that we do not allow ourselves to be captivated by any type of influence that would lead us from sound judgment. It says the sober-minded individual is not intoxicated, figuratively speaking, and is therefore calm under pressure, self-controlled in all areas, and rational. And this comes also from 2 Timothy 4:5. And it says surrender Paul's instructions to Timothy as keep your head, keep a clear mind in the NLT version, and exercise self-control in the CSB version. So it's interesting how you talk about you didn't want to sell your soul leading into that. And with mental health, making bad choices, a lot of times we know it's a bad choice. That's the funny part. We knew it was a bad choice, whether we got into something, whether it's just like an addiction, or you hung out with some people you shouldn't have hung out with, did something you shouldn't be doing, said something you shouldn't have said, and it keeps happening. A lot of the times we're aware of that. And I think it's interesting because with the whole policymaking thing, and it's just funny how everything just kind of aligns. I could definitely see how that could definitely go against your own beliefs, like you say, your soul, because then it's like, I can't support something that I don't agree with, because I'm just not going, unless you just want people to do everything for money, which I don't believe that you are. But it can definitely be a bother to somebody's mental health, because you can go crazy. People have seen stuff, whether they were doctors, whether they were lawyers, whether they were even in schools, where they seen stuff and they was like, I can't be a part of this, and they had to quit indefinitely. So before I move into the next source, I want to ask you, what would be like some advice to anybody who maybe has seen something that went against their beliefs, their sound judgment, and their clear-minded, and they had said, I can't be a part of this. How should I get out of this?
Yeah, you're a master of segues. Beautiful, beautiful segue. So yeah, I want to make a few commentaries on that, if I may, before answering the question.
Yeah.
So speaking of controls, repetitions of negative behaviors and pain and habits, the analogy I gave to a lot of folks who are asking about my pivots, because I want to make this clear. I pivoted during the peak of my career. At age 26, I was the youngest policymaker in my entire agency's 100-year-old history in Delaware County. 100-year history, I was the youngest. And I took that pivot during the peak, not during the worst. So I do want to make, because it's a very big difference. And the reason why people are asking me is, why did you make that pivot? Why didn't you just grind it out a few more years so you can become a position of power to impact that change? I told them nobody wakes up tying this to addictions, right? Nobody
Right.
wakes up and smoke 20 packs of cigarettes. You wake up and smoke the first cigarettes. And then through time, that first cigarette becomes 4 cigarettes. Nobody wakes up and finishes an entire bottle of Jack Daniel. You start with the first shot. So for me, I realized if I stayed the course, I would have to start making minor moral compromises for the sake of utilitarian impact. And by the time I look back in 20 years, I'll be making some crazy ass compromises for the sake of impact. And I didn't want to lose myself. Because if I were to ask you, Izzy, would you compromise a minor moral compromise today to impact 2,000 people? Would you say yes?
Right. Exactly.
Of
You know what I
course.
mean?
Who would say no? Yeah, of course you would say yes. But then in 10 years, that's going to be another compromise. And by the time you realize that half of your soul's gone for the sake of impact, and it is impact, but you got to draw the line somewhere. But to answer your questions, no advice. I'm not attached to anything I say on this show or ever. I'm open to feedback. Hopefully, I can change my own beliefs and opinions, whatever they takes. But some feedback is, as you said, I think you have to evaluate. Are you happy where you are in life? I call that reviewing the archive of your behaviors and patterns. So just examining where you are. You don't have to do anything. Just simply reviewing the archives of what you've done, where you're at. Are you showing up to your work? Are you showing up to your partner, your spouses, your parents, and your friends in the way that you're proud of? If you're not, what's missing? Right? So is it addiction? Is it your drinking habits? Are you going out too much versus showing up with your family at church? Because I'm a follower of Christ as well. So what are you not proud of? And if you're really being honest with that evaluation process, you're like, oh, wow, I'm not proud of how I'm as a friend. I haven't caught up with my friends in so long, family. Then just by being aware of that, I think changes may come. But you have to just take a moment, like take an hour every Sunday after church or before church as a routine. Create that system and just on a weekly basis, reviewing your archives. And I think if you're being honest with yourself, you're like, wow, I'm really deficient in this aspect. But that doesn't mean you're stuck. You can always do something about it.
Great answer. That was a good one, y'all. So that's a lot of time packed. We're gonna have to definitely chop that up and put that on the YouTube. Just that those because that was some good stuff. And like I said, to move on to the next part, I liked how you talked about, of course, just reviewing the archives in a sense. And that's a good way to just sit back. But see, I think a lot of times people wait till it's too late and then they try to do it all at once and they overwhelm. But and that's something I may even start doing, just take one day out the week. I mean, y'all can do it whenever. I'm thinking Sunday might be a good day. And to just sit and just kind of, what didn't I like? Kind of just review the week in a sense, and what you did like, maybe what you liked that you did do, what you didn't like that you did, and just kind of just see what needs to change, what we need to add to what we need to keep doing, because we can't just always highlight the bad stuff too. So, and especially in the topic in this segment with mental health. Now, this is from Sarah Ton. It's 8 bad habits that interfere with your mental health. So I'm gonna name them off, and then I'm gonna just put myself on the carpet and just say what I do. So, maintaining bad relationships. Don't do that. Not no more. Procrastination, 100%. Not sleeping enough. I'm getting better. A lot better. I had a sleep expert a few weeks ago. So, yeah. No, for real. I had a sleep expert on the show a few weeks ago. So she brought up some strategies. Overusing technology. I do that. Trying to be perfect. No, I don't do that. Overly stressed. I don't do that. I'm quick to some stressing me out. They gotta go, even if it's a job. Lack of exercise, not an issue. Anger. Okay. Here's the thing with anger that I've learned recently. Anger is not always punching walls, screaming, hollering, flipping tables. Anger is easily irritated. I'm easily irritated, and I'm known for that. And that's a form of anger. And I just learned that recently. Any of those things I've named, do you feel that you maybe struggle with or have any maybe expert insight on?
Yeah, so I think one of the grateful things I took away being a veteran when I closed out my military chapter is I take self-care as a first thought. It's never an afterthought. I
Yeah.
call myself a self-care savant sometimes as a joke, but like I make sure I get my 7 hours of sleep, even though I got 6 hours last night, because I'm in a very exciting plans of proposing to my girlfriend tomorrow of 3 years. So I had some best friends visiting. So I was catching up. So I didn't get as much sleep, but I took a morning hike this morning. So exercise is not a thing I've been working out for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
So I take my nutrition seriously, my diet seriously. I meditate 20 to 25 minutes every day for the past 3.5 years. So I think I have a lot of systems in place. With anger though, Izzy, I do feel like, because one thing that a lot of people forget, so I'm Korean, right? I'm a Korean American. In our culture, we call it K-rage, like K-drama. Like we have a lot of this Korean rage due to intergenerational trauma, etc. And one thing that it was hard for me to admit is being angry feels good. Like being angry feels good, and anger is a good feeling. And I definitely have a lot of these angry moments when I'm arguing with my girlfriend, who will soon to be my fiance. And a lot of my anger is non-violence, but it comes with my voice getting really loud or profanity or cussing left and right. And I think a lot of that comes with my inability to always feel like I'm in control, which is pretty laughable because God is in control and life's bigger than we are, period.
Right.
So I think anger is something that I've come a long way, but I still have some way to go. And I think that could be a lifelong process too.
Absolutely, because I believe, they talk about they praying that God remove this thorn from my side. And I believe that some thorns he will remove completely, but others will stay to just so that you have no choice but to rely on him at all times. So I think that's interesting that you said it, and I randomly thought about that. But also, I was on Instagram and I watched something about anger. I can't remember who it was. I can't give it was an iceberg. And I had seen it before, but it was anger was at the top. And it said anger is nothing more but these feelings, but we showing it through anger. And it's jealousy, guilt, fear, sadness, all that stuff. And I thought about a situation in college one time where we were supposed to go. My friends were throwing a party. People stay with me while I tell the story. So my friends was throwing a party, and it was the same day as this other thing. And I said, "Oh, well, I'm going to this. I'm not going to go to the party." And one of the friends had got kind of like snarky and shady, like, and was like, "Well, I don't see why you go to that event because you wouldn't make it there." Something basically trying to downplay me in that event. But what it was I'm mad because you're not being a friend and coming to my party. Was it okay? No. Is it I'm accepting of it? No. But I get it because I'm upset. So I'm not gonna say I'm mad you're not coming. I'm gonna just say this about that. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of a lot of the times anger is really, I said it to say anger is a cover up most of the time.
Yeah. Could I say
ahead.
something about that?
Go ahead.
So yeah, clinically, there is what we known as primary emotions, which is like primal, primitive, prehistoric emotions we've always had eons ago, and that's fear. So fear is the number one primary emotions all of us humans have ever, because obviously fear helps us survive. That's why we're here sitting across the screen from each other. And anger is almost always a secondary emotions. So as you said beautifully, that anger is usually a byproduct of fear. Because like your friend, he was angry because he feels like he's losing control over your actions, you committed, you changed, etc. And one thing I want to talk about, what you said, removing thorns, quoting the Bible, I live by this quote that Morgan Freeman said a while ago in an interview. He said that when you pray for patience, God doesn't give you patience. Mm-hmm. God gives you opportunities to be patient. Right. When you pray for love, he doesn't give you love. He gives you opportunities to demonstrate love. And when you ask for forgiveness, he doesn't give you forgiveness. He gives you opportunity to be forgiven or forgive others. That's how I view anger. So I don't think he's going to give us this magic pill that makes us all Zen and calm and Buddha-like. but I think he's going to give us opportunities in life to test our strength to reel back the anger. Because once again, being angry feels good most of the time.
And when you were when you were in the army, do you feel like there were many instances where anger was present? I'll say that.
Oh, facts, of course. There's a lot of stupidity in the army because you have all these 18, 17-year-olds who've never left their home, and now they're using the army as a vehicle to get out, which is cool. But there's just a lot of stupidity, a lot of ignorance, a lot of closed-mindedness, a lot of subtle racism due to ignorance, because a lot of these folks never left their tiny little town, bomb middle of nowhere. Sorry, excuse my French.
That's funny.
And because of that, I got a lot of frustrated because I was born in Paris. My name is French. I spent the first time in my life in 3 different continents and 4 different countries. So I'm not middle of nowhere, right? So when you're dealing with heightened awareness and a lot of this open worldview, and you face that with closed-mindedness due to lack of experiences, it's very frustrating. So I definitely got into trouble numerous times for being angry, getting into a physical altercations with my battle buddies in the boot camp trainings or things like that. So all that to say, 100%.
Now, it's interesting because with the army, a lot of the people that I know personally, I can definitely tell, they'll tell me they had PTSD. Do you think you still have any PTSD from the army?
No, so fortunately, I've only had 1 near deployment, so I don't have any post-traumatic stress disorder. Actually, some of my PTSD symptoms are from my other near-death experiences, like car crash, that we can talk more about later. But from the army specifically, no, because a lot of people talk about PTSD, which is very real. At the same time, not a lot of people know about post-traumatic stress, or my apologies, post-traumatic growth, PTG. What that means is you integrate the insights you get from the trauma, and you apply that in a very integrative way, and it creates profound insights. So I had some because I got my first major depressions when I was in the army because of my deployment in 2017. So that was a really dark time. But I view that in just nothing but gratitude, because he gave me this new way of life, new way of lens. So no PTSD from the experience, fortunately.
Okay. All right. So now, as we move into the next segment, which is the weekly sabbatical, and we know, well, my people know that's a time of a reflection and just kind of looking back on some things. So first of all, when you look back on, because for those that don't know, he's actually been sober for 2 years, correct?
2 years.
From alcohol. So before we get into that conversation, why do you think, I feel like it's always has, I feel like it comes every generation, it comes in a different way. The underlying root of it is, I feel like, social drinking. But why do you think being drunk or alcohol is such a hold on this generation? But I kind of answered that question, but I want your take on it.
Yeah, so quick briefly. So before I quit, I used to be part of the Greek life like 8-9 years ago in college. So I drank a lot until 2 years ago. But I feel like the alcohol is one of the hardest addictions to fight off. And it's actually one of the 2 withdrawals that could kill you in the world. It's only one of the 2 substances withdrawal that could kill you is alcohol. That's how severe it is. And alcohol actually go through your system when you drink it the same way water does. It literally permeates through every organs in your body. So just let that sink in. That's alcohol, ethanol. But I think just how normal it is. It's like it's celebrated upon. Everyone talks about it like it's normal. Every commercial has alcohol in it, like football, Super Bowl, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Every major holiday has alcohol in it. So it's almost like if you don't drink, you're an outlier. You're the abnormal. You're the weird one. Mm-hmm. And there's so many of these justifications about why alcohol works. But I'm not bashing on alcohol. I think I don't view things as good or bad as mental health. I think it just is, does it serve you or does it not serve you? Alcohol served me well for X amount of years, and it started to disturb my relationship in a negative way. So I quit for the sake of relationship, which now obviously it's coming to fruition through engagement tomorrow. But I don't think it's a bad thing. Like a lot of people view alcohol, as you said, as a social call, as like a social thing.
Yeah.
And I have a chef friend. He talks about food is this bond that brings his loved ones together. And I think alcohol does it for a lot of folks. At the same time, if you're reviewing your archives of your behaviors, you can drink, but an alcoholic can't drink. So it's not really the substance, but about does it serve you or not. And if it doesn't serve you, in my case, it didn't, I had to quit.
Well, that's a good way to look at it too. And it does it serve you or does it not? I think that the thing is, and people always highlight, well, people always say, well, being drinking isn't the sin, being drunk is the sin. And that always comes from a drunk.
Yeah.
So that's what kills me. I'm like, but you were drunk. So clown. But even with that, it's just funny because I think, like I said, history always repeats itself in different ways. And with this generation, because social drinking has always been a thing, but for this generation and this age group, it's always the Sunday fun days,
Yeah.
the brunches. Those are easy tempting points for alcohol, especially if you're a person, because obviously, can you go to those events and not drink? Absolutely. But if you try not to drink, it's kind of like, why would you go? And because you're going to be tempted, because somebody's going to say, oh, go ahead, just take a shot, or oh, just have a drink. Like, no, I'm okay. And in some cases, you might even have to say, it's a way to go about it, though, for those who want to know. So, like, say for instance, you like saying, without lying, because you could lie and say you're on medication, but don't do that. But you can like, somebody gonna do it. But like, you could say, I'm really need to be focused right now, so I'm really not drinking today. And you may have made it up. You and God might have had to say you ain't gonna drink ever again, but you telling them that, which is not a lie. I'm working on something. I need to be super laser focused. I ain't drinking today. Cool. See, you ain't even have to lie. But yeah, it's funny because every event there is some alcohol present. It's just how it is, and it's just like you need to maybe kind of, till you get it together, just kind of take yourself out of the equation. That way, you won't even have to worry about it, because then you got to go buy it. So with that, this man has had 3 near-death experiences. Everybody, and did any one of them include alcohol?
Yes, it did. And that's the crazy part, because I didn't quit when I should have then. But before that, I love what you said, like, because as a non-drinking person, I've been a groomsman at my best friend's wedding, and I went to numerous weddings. Wedding's tough staying sober because coffee only gets you so far, and you got to be chugging that till 10 p.m. because everyone else is drunk out of their minds. So drunk people energies is hard to handle at a wedding, but I could just go to bars and chill, just have a ciders or water. But like if you tell people, oh, I don't smoke cigarettes or weed, people are like, oh, dude, great for you, man, good for you. And you tell them you don't drink, they bombard with questions. Oh, why not? Not even this? What about just a drink or two? It's like, what? Like, why are you forcing me to question my healthy lifestyle? That's crazy. Right. But I just want to put a comparison with smoking and drinking. But yeah, my first near-death experience was actually in 2014 or 2015. That's when I first moved to Philadelphia. I went out on the weekends. Like I said, I used to drink a lot. And I'm one of those social butterflies where I get sick of my friends. I'm too social for my friends that after a certain drink, I ditch them because they're too boring for me, and I make new friends. And I used to social smoke. That's another thing about alcohol. When you're drunk, you put whatever in your mouth. Anything that moves, just put in your mouth. And I went outside to get some cigarettes, and I found myself in downtown Philadelphia in their neighborhood where there's a lot of like popping clubs. And this club is called Woody's. It's one of the biggest clubs in all of Philadelphia, which is, I thought it was pretty safe because it's downtown. And I found myself being a drunk, blacked out social butterfly into the alleyway for some reasons. I could have just gone back to the club. And I turned around. There was this guy. He jumped me. I have a scar right here from my head trauma from that weekend. I still never recovered some of the memories. He knocked me out, took my phone, my wallet, my belt, and my loafers that I had on at the time. And I woke up the next day in the ER. And I said, shit, I drank too much. I must have just blacked out, alcohol poisoning. And the nurse told me, no, a bystander had to call you in because you were bleeding out in the alleyway by Woody's because someone jumped me. And I filed that report to the detective after I got discharged. And they asked me point blank, he's like, did you get stabbed? I said, no, but I almost got stabbed. I have a scar from getting knocked out on the curbway. And he looked at me in straight eyes and told me, dude, don't even try. Hundreds of people get stabbed and shot every night in Philly. your report not even gonna make it to the top 10. So I never even got to file my case. And here's a crazy part: I went out and drank again the next weekend. That's what alcohol does. And I have extremely high willpower and disciplines. I'm a mindset habit person since I was 14. But guess what? I almost got stabbed and died first weekend in Philadelphia. And I resumed that like nothing happened the next weekend. That's crazy. That's alcohol.
Yeah. Driving blacked out drunk, barely made it home, and then be like, can't wait to do it again. And you can't see, you just vibing. Yeah. And it's horrible. We laughing. This again, it's a satire podcast, so we laughing because it's so terrible. It's just like,
dude,
and a lot of the people listening been there. They're probably doing it now.
Like, how many people, like, if you're a female, like you get your hair pulled back in the toilet and you're like, oh, I'm never drinking again, until 8 hours later. Oh, you want to go out for a brunch tomorrow morning? Hell yeah. It's like, what? You were just puking your guts out like green acid, and now you're back at it. So it's a very powerful substance for sure.
Oh, wow. So we talked about alcohol, and that's one of the reasons we now, of course, it centers around just making bad choices or choosing to make the right choice in a lot of situations and I think this is centering down to what serves you and what doesn't serve you. So watch this. So now you said, that you gave up sex with your girlfriend for a year and a half.
Almost 2 years also.
What was the reason for that? Because how did sex with your girlfriend not serve you?
Yeah. And also, to even go a level deeper, that was during when I lived with my girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's not even long distance. It's not even we have a distance. Like, we lived together in the same bedroom. And the thing about giving up sex is you also have to create parameters and systems. Like, you can't hook up. You can't like just do French kiss and eat your face out, because that's going to create temptations, right? So you got to block everything. And we always joke around that I went from a frat star to a monk, because our relationship was very pure, like middle school. We just hold hands and cuddles. But the reason why I decided to give up sex, in part, I had this God moment with God, where I literally felt him telling me that, hey, Benoit, I know you always had this moral incongruence internally, that you always felt guilty hooking up or partaking in sex, right? And some people call that guilt. I call it incongruence because of my faith and my religious background. Yeah, exactly. And I always had this just extra noises and incongruence that would impact me. And it's not like, oh, I'll feel guilty for like months after I had sex. It comes into you, like it comes into your consciousness here and there, which distracts you here and there. So I wanted to really address that incongruence and really recommit and reframe and review what sex really means as this sacred act between someone that you really devote yourself to and love, and not necessarily to a marriage per se, but at least make it a very intentional and wholesome thing. Because I think we need to reclaim what love is. Like, Western context has diluted what love means for a lot of us. I think like we use the word way too loosely. Oh, I love this, I love that, or I love you, or like, so I view that very sacredly. And I think sex is like the epitome of demonstrating love with someone else. So I wanted to reclaim that in the right way. So, and like I said, we're getting engaged soon after tomorrow. So I feel like it's more appropriate time. And we can also talk about what did I take away? What did I learn from giving up sex? But the pure intention was I just wanted to address my incongruence, because as you said this in the beginning of the show, being aware of something isn't enough. You need to do something about it.
Yeah, that was a great segue, and I'm sure somebody that is helping somebody might even consider doing that, just so that you can have a clarity. Because I'm finna get slightly graphic, because people highlight post nut clarity, but the real clarity is not doing nothing at all. Okay, all right. Now, when you told her about it, because we kind of talked, we hinted at her, how did she feel about it?
So that's a crazy part. So she actually tried it with her ex-boyfriend of 7 years, because she also felt the same way. She's very spiritual. I tell people I'm religious by practice as a Christian, but I'm spiritual by trait. I have a very esoteric spiritual way of looking at the world. And she's very similar to, like, she could actually sense some energies. People may view that as woo-woo, but I've actually seen it in action. And I'm a scientist. I'm a social scientist, so I'm very empirical that way. But yeah, he's like, she told me, oh yeah, I actually tried that with my ex. Didn't work out. It lasted like a month for them. And I said, hey, I'm different. I really have a very high self-discipline. Let's create accountability systems. We'll do X, Y, and Z to ensure we don't face the forbidden fruit, that temptations again. And we talked about it on a Sunday. Every Sunday, we have this segment called Glows and Grows. Sounds kind of corny, but it's every single week after church. We both serve. I serve on high school ministry every Sunday. She works out. She helps with the media team. After we come back, we have our small group with our teams after we serve. And then we spend about 30 minutes to an hour to talk about the glows. What did we do well this week? What are some of the things that you appreciate in me as my partner, as my girlfriend, and vice versa? And then the grows. What can we do better? What can we grow upon? And this is a really intentional place where I call each other out in a very respectful, productive way. And we had that conversation during the Glows and Grows that week. And we talked about it. We talked about some of the system parameters about how we want to make this happen. And it's been 2 years now. So, and one more thing I want to add is like the post not clarity. That's pretty funny, but like our intention was only to address the moral incongruence. But I think the biggest takeaway that we got is when you take away sex and sexuality and lust as a crutch, when you have your fights and when shit goes down in your relationship, you can't just have a makeup sex. You really got to talk that shit out. And if sex and lust is not part of the equation, for us to be 2 years long going on to our 3-year anniversary tomorrow, that means there's actual substance in the relationship. That's how I know she's going to be my lifelong partner, because we don't believe in divorce because of our parents' situation. So that's a huge unintended and unexpected but profound benefits that we took away from this journey of recommitting to abstinence.
That's good. That's good. And it also highlights the benefits of it, because a lot of times when they hear like the rules of what we're not supposed to do, they just hear it as like just not really why. And when you break it down that way, it makes it easier for people to say, even if they don't stick with it, even if they only do it for a season, at least it's something in that season they can gain that they wouldn't have had if they kept doing what they were doing.
Yeah, it's also like confidence, right? It's like knowing that you could do it.
Knowing you could and then choosing not to. It's like going, you could pull somebody, but choosing not to.
Yep.
It's kind of like that too a little bit. That's a little shallow, but I mean, it's true. Okay. So what advice would you give to a person who feels like, I can't quit this? We didn't talk about alcohol. We didn't talk about sex. I can't stop. What would be your advice? Because we already know one part of it is, how is it serving you? Of course, somebody would say, well, it's serving me like this. But seriously, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think it reminds me of the book Power of Why by Simon Sinek. I like the circle of why, how, and what. So I think it comes down to the power of why. Like, what is your reason of why? Like, I didn't share that story to tell people I'm a saint. Like, I didn't achieve sainthood. I'm still a sinful, flawed human being. I simply chose to embark on that very, very difficult, very hard, pun intended, journey because it served us really well. So, so because of that, I think you have to ask yourself, why are you doing what you're about to do? Whether that's quitting cigarettes, quitting alcohol, sex, smelling, I don't know, whatever bad habits, inserts, ask yourself, is it actually disturbing you, or is it just what people are saying? Because there's a huge difference. You don't want to do things people say you should do. I didn't quit sex or alcohol because people say you should quit. I did it out of my own will and my own discerning of the reason why. And then based on the why, if the why is strong enough, sure, you might have your off day. Like you said, Izzy, it might be a season. You might not be able to, quote unquote, stick to it for the whole time. You might, air quote, quit prematurely. I think having a why makes your rebound a lot sooner and a lot faster that way. So have a power of why, and then have a circle of trust, people who really love you, who give you feedback from a place of love, like love over fear, and make sure that you have this accountable system that holds you accountable in a very supportive way. Because I talk about this in my show a lot, where I think healing sometimes and often takes a village, and we don't have to walk this path of life alone.
Good stuff. Absolutely. So let's move into my other article, the last one for the day. It says How to Stop Bad Habits, 9 Scientifically Proven Methods by Leon Ho. Because of time, I'm not going to do all 9, but I did pick like 5 of them I really liked. So the first one is create a new environment for good habits to grow. To stop bad habits, you need to focus on positive cues that reinforce good habits and other approaches to build new habits, and stop exposing yourself to cues that will strengthen negative patterns. You will find it easier to avoid temptation than to resist it. I think in a situation like that, like he said, a village, and then finding a community that's on the same page. So there are people out there that's doing what you're doing as far as if you want to, even if, like you said, it's for a season, you say, I'm going to stop having sex for this season, I'm going to stop drinking for this season, or permanently. There are people who are on that journey with you, in this the beautiful part about social media, despite, there's a lot of creeps and weirdos and stuff, and scammers and art logo people, and people that's asking you what's your bank account and who you bank with, and people that's always saying how much they love giving oral sex. That spam pages, he laughing because he know what I'm talking about. I know y'all know what I'm talking about, and they like your stories. You think that's your crush, and it's not your crush, it's a spam page. But besides that, it is some good people online, you know what I mean? And people that you can build relationships with in lifelong, like he said, accountability partners. So I think that's good for that as far as when you're trying to level up. So keep that in mind. The second one says identify the consequences of the bad habits. It says bad habits have grave consequences. According to WebMD, bad habits affect nearly every organ of your body. Remember, he said alcohol goes through every part of your body. They can lead to cancer, stroke, diabetes, heart disease, bronchitis, and other health problems. Bad habits can increase the chances of eye problems, tuberculosis, and several immune disorders such as rheumatoid arthritis. It becomes easy to stop those bad habits when you are aware of the consequences. Now, I seen a post that says them red flags look like green flags when you when the sex good or something. And I said, see, that's like how he said earlier, that's the problem, because you crutching on something, so you looking past all the bad stuff. Because I'm a firm believer, you gonna get signs of somebody before you have the final shebang of who they are. Like when people be like, oh, out of nowhere he just started hitting me, or oh, out of nowhere shit, there were signs, you missed them. They were definitely present.
Yep.
The third one is simple, but I actually have gotten back on it personally. It says practice positive speaking. There's daily affirmations, watching what you say just in general, because words have power. And people talk about like music, and here's the thing with music. A lot of the songs are obviously bad. People say, well, it's just a song. No, it's not, because if you're singing it, your conscious doesn't know that you're singing a song. So it's not gonna say, oh, he's singing a song, so it don't matter if you said, I'm a killer, I'm gonna do this. And some of the songs have said stuff like, I'm gonna kill myself and stuff, and you saying it over yourself, you don't know what you could be manifesting. So keep that in mind. And yeah. The fourth one says make bad habits difficult and painful. Now, that one is interesting, because it's basically saying that something that you in love doing, now make it bad. In his case, he didn't have that choice, because I felt like even with the alcohol, I felt like you were getting signs to stop. It was like, you ain't gonna stop, I got something for you. So you had to go through a near-death experience for it to kind of like, okay, and that was happening with me with weed some years ago. So I used to smoke weed, and I stopped, and I kept like going back and forth with it, and then I had a real bad panic attack, and I haven't been back since.
Yeah, God teaches the lessons one way or the other.
Right. And then the final one that I picked out that I thought was interesting, it says start from simple to complex. A lot of times we just want a big change so fast. You have to start with the little stuff first. Like, you want to change your life, small stuff. Okay, I'm gonna start going to sleep a little earlier. Then I may change up my diet a little bit. The cutting stuff out, everything completely is not gonna work. You have to do a slow kind of like ease out of it, because you're just gonna relapse, and it was gonna be a waste of time and money and hope. Anything you want to add to that before we move into the final segment?
Yeah, I want to talk about you talked about weight loss in the beginning of your show, as it's a lifelong process. There is a really important phenomenon and very common thing that happens for people who lose a lot of weight all at once is rebound effect. I'm not talking about romantic or sexual rebounds. I mean, your weight's going back to where you were and even surpassing your original weight, that some most often rebound effect happens because you do go from 0 to 100. You go from eating McDonald's and French fries and Big Mac combo at midnight on a Sunday, and on Monday you cut everything out and you have nothing but salad and greens.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is going to happen? Like, you think your neural pathways, your brain, and your habits are there to support the foundations of your new behavior? Definitely not. So what happens is people will lose some weight visibly at first, and then given a week or two, they gain everything back and more. So I think like that applies to all new habit building, and you have to do incremental, like the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which talks a lot about the principles of the articles you're reading. He talks about 1% better every single day and strive for progression, not perfection. Because unless your last name is Christ, first name is Jesus, you're not perfect. So,
all right, that was a good one. So now let's move into the final segment, which is game time. And this game is called Under the Influence. I'm gonna name a few scenarios, and I want you to tell me whether or not this person is under some type of they're not sober minded, basically. So that they're under whether it's influence of a drug or alcohol, just any influence, because sometimes you don't have to even be on a substance to be under the influence. All right, so you ready?
let's do it.
All right. The first segment. Man lashes out at kids and girlfriend for not cooking dinner.
Wow.
That started off rough.
He might just be very traditional man who doesn't understand how the world works, or really pissed off or have unhappy life of its own that he lashes out to regain control. But could be substance, could be just he has a lot of work to do.
All right. Being upset that the lane in the traffic, your favorite traffic lane is closing, you're going to be late to work.
So everyone in LA driving in the morning, not substance. I think they're just short-tempered. There's a lot of anger, and they lash out because that's the only way for them to feel like they're in control.
All right. Being upset because things in your house are randomly misplaced, but you're the one that misplaced them.
Definitely could be substance, too much weed. Maybe forget to leave your order at the door overnight and it's not good, and you file reclaim saying that never got delivered. Could be that. Or not the best memory. Maybe you should read a little bit more books and revive some of your brain cells. I don't know, one of those possibilities.
So it's something. All right, this is the last one. And finally, you are not upset. You are happy as you've ever seen somebody, and going around hugging everybody, telling them you love
them. My background is in psychedelic science as well. So it could be some ecstasy. You're feeling this oneness of love. Everything is lovey-dovey, very colorful. So it could be substance like psychedelics, like ecstasy, or it could be a very person like with golden retriever energy, just very loving, very open, part-time hippies. Maybe they're kind of stuck in the ethers, but definitely could be substance.
All right, golden retriever energy. That's what we're going to hashtag it. I wish I had a hashtag because I do that. That's funny. All right, y'all. So let's move on to the end with the question of the challenge. For this week, I want y'all to tell me what are some bad habits you want to cut out of your life, and then how do you plan to work towards stopping them completely? So at least being aware. I can't make you do it, but at least be aware. So, my boy, Benoit, before you go, it's been a great conversation. Anything you want to leave off with the people?
Yeah, I want to tie into your challenge questions with the way you started this week's episode, Izzy, is that I say this a lot on the show, where awareness without action creates burden. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of us nowadays in 2022, when everyone and their mothers have a podcast, everyone and their mothers are self-proclaimed gurus and life coaches out there, which is not the case. There are some legit ones out there, but I think there's a lot of phonies.
Right.
I feel like we're bombarded with all these awareness, like, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Oh, here's some brain science. Here's the newest 2020 life hack will change your life overnight. And a lot of us are caught up and grappled and overwhelmed by all these awareness. And a lot of them are legit. but
Right.
then they don't really tell you what to do about it. So it's almost like there's a lot of us who are stuck in this limbo where you're aware of your flaws and you're aware of some of your unhealthy or unsustainable behaviors or habits, like bad habits. But then those people don't really have the toolkits or the privilege or the access to get additional resources and action steps to do something about this new heightened awareness. So they just feel worse and worse, increased shame, increased guilt, lower self-esteem. They feel like they're useless and they're failures because they can't do something about it. But like we said, we can't go from 0 to 100. So I hope that all of us on this path of mental health, this collective path of life that all of us are in, I hope that all of us can give ourselves a little more grace, a little bit more patience, and a little bit more love. And because the latest statistics shows that 78% of us extend and show more grace and love for others versus yourselves. Like, ask yourself, when your friends are in a dark place, they come to you. What do you tell them? You don't tell them to sleep it off, shrug it off. You'll be fine. You hug them. You ask about their problems. You make them feel heard. But then if I ask the same people, how do you show up to yourself when you're feeling down and when you're in a dark place? You're probably just in this inner critic voice is like, dude, just work harder. Just what are you doing? What you're going through isn't as bad as what Izzy went through or what Benoit went through, or you didn't have near-death experiences, so just shrug it off. It's like, no, all of our journeys are valid. So I hope we validate and we show us some little bit more grace and patience and compassion, because that's the only way for us to show up to the full version for others that we love.
All right, that was a good ending. I want to thank you for coming today. Discover More podcast. Y'all got to check into it. All right, it's definitely a listen. Now it's a little more serious than mine, but it's definitely still effective, and it's definitely full of gems. A lot of good people got a good research. I can definitely tell he put his all in it, and by the time this airs, he'll already be engaged. So we're gonna have to say congratulations to you now in advance, and then when it airs, I'll definitely reach back out probably before then and see how it goes. But yeah, that's all I got for y'all today. Next week we have another great guest. Tune in, tap in as y'all been doing, reposting, put in the story, and also make sure you give him a follow as well, which you'll see his Instagram and stuff on the bio. So PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are and make your mind up. Don't let it make you.